It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? It's the Take Command podcast. That is Logan Paulsen. I am Craig Hoffman. And if I sound very excited, it's because training camp starts this week. Yay!
I know, very exciting. Woo! Very exciting. Very exciting for training camp.
Are you more excited for training camp as a broadcaster or as a player?
Oh, dude, I hated training camp as a player.
Golly,
I got all my guys that I train, those NFL guys, and like you seeing them last week, I was just like, God, I'm so happy I don't have to do that. Like, cause it's like so stressful. It's like not only stressful because, like you're about to go through this physical torment and toil and your body's going to feel the best it's ever felt for the year, like today. But it's also like, do I have a job? Am I going to make the team? Is it going to work out? The stress level this time of year was insanely high. So for me, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's so much easier for me to comment, like watch practice, commentate on practice. And again, I do have like an emotional attachment to these guys because I know and I empathize with how hard that is. But, as empathetic as I can be, I'm not doing it, so it makes it a little bit easier. You know what I mean? To just
for sure.
Like, all right,
you and Smoot are not in a position battle for your spot on command
correct.
center.
That's right.
And there's
as
no
far as I know anyway, right?
Yeah, I can confirm there's no one coming for your spot on this show. So we are all set, locked in, long-term contracts, if you will. I don't want to jinx it. It's media. There's never anything such as a long-term contract. We just actually constantly live in the state that you lived in. I don't want to get too deep into this. Is this becoming a therapy session? Okay, the point is later in the podcast, we're going to go three key questions per position. So we're going to preview the entire team. If you have tuned out for the summer, tuned out for the spring, tuned out maybe since the draft or since the last season, and you're ready to lock back in, we're going to get you set with three key questions for each position. But Logan, training camp in general is very exciting. And for the Commanders, it's the start of a new era or the continuation of the start of the new era. Dan Quinn in charge. When you think about DQ's training camp that you went through in Atlanta, obviously he was there for multiple years. So you were there for one of them. Like what stuck out about a Dan Quinn training camp that you're excited to see this year for the Commanders?
I think just the energy. I'd been around for a little bit. I'd been obviously in Washington for 6 seasons, had 2 different head coaches, was in Chicago, was in San Francisco, and then going to Atlanta, like it just was the energy of practice, for guys that even been there for a long time, was extremely high. They got the music going, they've got the energy drill before the day starts, and it really kind of made it fun to be out there. Like I always enjoyed practice, but there was something different about it in Atlanta. And I got a taste of that when I was in San Francisco because Kyle really tried to embrace some of those tenets that he learned when he was under Dan in Atlanta. So I got a little bit of a preview of it, but to see it kind of, in its original iteration was pretty cool. And I do think that's kind of the way camps and training camps in general are going. They're still very hard. They're still very physically and mentally demanding. But I think, coaches understand that, especially with kind of the modern player that has a little bit more influence on things. It's like, let's make sure they have a good time, because if they have a good time, they're going to put more effort into it and we're going to get a better result. So I think that was one of the main differences being with Dan. And then I think the other thing was like the sense of community that he had developed in the off season. I felt really showed up in training camp because it wasn't like, I'm just here hanging out, trying to like get through the day. It's like, I'm excited to see, the guys. We got a break at 12:30. I'm excited to play some ping pong. Like it just made the day a little bit better. And in training camp, anything that makes it go a little bit smoother and a little bit better is a win. So even though those might have been small wins, those definitely had a large impact on my perception of my time in Atlanta for sure.
Definitely don't tell Chris Russell about the ping pong tables.
Is he get salty about that?
Oh, you don't know about this bit?
No, is this a wacky?
Oh, it's a long running. Yeah, he hated the ping pong table.
Why?
Because Chris Russell hates fun.
No, let me just tell you this. Like I'm about as hardo as you can get. So for me, like I saw the ping pong table for the first play. It was here. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like we're here to play football, but it brings the team together. Because like I talked to guys that I never would talk to in a million years over that ping pong table. And like, you know, people like talking smack to each other, and it just builds a sense of chemistry and team camaraderie. Obviously you can overdo it, no doubt about it. Like if you're missing meetings or something because you're playing ping pong table's got to go. But I think it's a point that like, it's a team building point, you know? And so like when they got cornhole and ping pong and a basketball thing, it's like, great. Like guys are hanging out together, which is really hard to do nowadays. Like, cause guys just want to get in and leave as soon as possible. So I think it's great. And so ping pong table's back. Obviously a tool, can be used incorrectly, but I'm big pro ping pong table guy.
As am I, because I like fun and I like team building and I like camaraderie, and I realize that it matters. And
it does matter. You're not a robot. As much as I wanted to be a robot when I was playing, I realized
you tried so hard to be a robot when you were playing.
And now I realize like you're not a robot. You gotta have fun, and I think that's part of the ping pong table.
Yeah. So take that, Chris Russell. If Logan Paulson says there's a ping pong table and it's okay.
I love Chris, and you know,
So
Chris can have his takes, but
the thing I love most about Chris Russell is poking the bear. And so, you know, that's if we get a chance to do this and then he hears this later or is brought to his attention, then, you know, we'll just sit back and enjoy the results of the fruits of our labor.
You do. You and Grant both love poking Chris Russell for whatever reason.
It's too easy. Honestly, I feel bad saying this, but it's low hanging fruit.
Oh, God.
Okay. So as for Quinn and company, the thing that I'm looking forward to is, does like practice run smoothly? Do they feel like everybody is on the same page? Because we saw that really well in the spring, and I just can't help but thinking back and comparing it to last year where, you know, we saw EB like getting into guys, and in hindsight it was like, oh, because nobody knew what they were doing. Like that's not good. And you need to be, I was actually, it's funny how you wind up like reading a book or reading an article or listening to a podcast and you're like, oh, that thing really applies. But I was reading this book by a guy named Steve Magnus, who's a coach and like psychologist type of person. And he wrote this book on toughness. And he talks about how we take, or like a lot of people took the wrong thing out of military training, where a lot of people took the like, we have to stress the hell out of our guys. And it's like, that's actually not what the military does. The military does training like that because they're trying to prepare their soldiers for the actual stress of war. And so, yes, they do put them through like these hellish exercises. But what they do first, and what the military found over time as they played with different ways of doing this, is you have to give people the tools first and then stress them so that they're prepared to go into battle in a literal sense for the military. But if you want to do these types of like really, really tough training and weeding out type things, you have to actually give players or soldiers in the military's case a chance to succeed. And so, yes, do I want to see some stressful drills where you have, you know, the clock going and score situational football, and Dan does a lot of situational football work? Yes, but you have to go into those drills knowing what you want to accomplish. That way you can execute the plan. You need the tools in your toolbox to solve the problem. Otherwise, you're just going to get stressed because you don't actually know what you're doing, and that's not productive. It's not useful. It doesn't help anybody learn. All it does is just make people feel bad and fail a lot. There's no weeding out in that. It is you have ill prepared the people to go into the task that they are doing. And so that's something that I'm really looking forward to, is how prepared does the team look for practice on a day in, day out basis? Because I do think that is something that will translate into the season of, okay, that means they got good practice in, and it also shows the way the coaching staff thinks about preparation in a way that hopefully also means they're going to be equally prepared for games.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I think about it, you know, from a strength and conditioning standpoint, it's like you don't have someone go run like a max 100-meter first day of training because they're not physically equipped to handle it, right? And it's the same thing, like you got to, like, so for example, last year at the high school, I was really frustrated. Things weren't going the way I wanted them to go from an installation standpoint. I'm my offensive coordinator at high school. And so I did this drill called Perfect Drill. And Perfect Drill basically is like, you can't ask me any questions and we have to get perfect execution for 5 plays. If we don't get perfect execution, we have like laps or some type of physical punishment. And we did it one day. And I was like so angry afterwards because it didn't, like, there was a million questions. We had to run the whole practice. We lost all this productive time. And one of the coaches who was much more experienced came up to me and said, "Hey man, like what can you learn from this?" And I was like, well, I guess that they're not prepared for where I thought they would be prepared at. So I do think like a good structured training camp and a good like installation period is extremely important. Like, teams are getting better at like accelerating this process, going red zone 2 minute earlier in training camp, which is important because you got to practice those situations. But I think they've also done a good job of saying like, we're going to prioritize red zone earlier in the install, as opposed to like generic install. It's red zone early, 2 minute early, then base offense kind of supplementing that. So you are kind of learning base offense, but we're getting these situations earlier. But to your point, they've prepped it, they've installed it in a way that makes it work. So I think that's going to be extremely important and smooth. And I think like when you're watching practice, like if it clicks off nicely, there's not a lot of repeats. There's people know where. That's another thing, is just watching whether or not people know where to go in practice. Like I used to, like as a player, I'd be like, why are we talking about this? Like I'll just follow my coach. But it's so funny, like when you're in the moment and it's like, oh, I got team run now. It allows you to run to that drill and be confident to that drill. You're not milling around looking for the next thing. Like you know. And I think like that all goes into that thing you were just talking about, is there's a scaffolding that props up a practice and makes it go smoothly. And it doesn't start on the practice field. It starts in the meeting room. It starts during OTAs. Like that structure has to be laid out. So I think that's a great point. And hopefully we get to see that, because I think, that's another thing about Dan's practices in Atlanta. They were all pretty smooth. So obviously he's got a feel and a comfort level with that. And hopefully that same execution happens here.
Yeah, and if guys are lagging behind, I think it's on the coaches to be like, what did we not do well enough to prepare them? And obviously the players need to also take responsibility. And that's kind of what the best teams always do, is like each individual part, whether it's coach, player, trainer, equipment guy, whatever, every single person that's involved goes, what can I do better? And there's no finger pointing, there's no whatever. If there's any talk about someone else, it's about how do we collaborate better? And so that's something that I'm definitely looking forward to seeing from just an operational standpoint, that I think will translate into playing better football in the fall. Anything else on a big picture standpoint before we dive into these positional group previews?
I mean, I think obviously just like the new era of DC is here. This is like the first time we're going to get to see it. Obviously, Josh Harris owned the team last year, but this is the first time we're getting to see like his imprint. Adam Peters, the player he's brought in, the culture they've developed, the renovations in the building, like how they're going to handle training camp. You mentioned Dan, but his whole staff, Cliff and Wink, like the whole thing, or Joe Witt Jr., excuse me, I said Witt. But all of that stuff, I think, is something that I'm tremendously excited to see. And I think just the newness, the excitement around it is something that can't be overstated, in terms of like how you feel about this organization and about this opportunity for this season. Young quarterback, we'll talk about that here in a minute, but everything's new. And I think that they've done a really good job, at least on paper so far, of making good hires. And now we get to see, how does practice look? Are these coaches doing what they're supposed to do? Are we seeing the offensive and defensive innovation or evolution that we were hoping to see with all these guys coming in? So lots of really cool things, I think, to kind of keep an eye on. But that's something I think that the value of which can't be overstated, is all of these new coaches, all of these new peoples in leadership positions. Like, how does that affect this organization? So that's what I'm really excited to check out.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm also excited to see kind of what the fan experience is like.
Yeah.
There's only 5 fan practices this year, but last year, like, they had some of the hospitality and stuff on that turf field, and that's not available because they dug it up and it's a big pile of dirt. And eventually will be another grass field, but for right now, it's not done. So I think that most of the fan stuff will be kind of where it was last year, that hospitality tent off to the side. But yeah, I'm excited to see kind of how they run practice and how the fan experience is. And also, like last year with Harris buying the team, there was such massive turnout.
Yes.
This year, you have that, plus the enthusiasm of a new coach, plus the enthusiasm of Jayden Daniels, and not to mention the other young players. But we all know that the young quarterback is in number 2 overall pick. That's going to drive mega enthusiasm. So I'm excited to see, what all of you listening do in terms of the turnout on these fan practices. The enthusiasm last year was crazy because it's one thing to get 10,000 people on a Saturday, which I'd imagine, the welcome home day, which I think is the 28th. So I think this Saturday is that or whatever it is. So check the Commanders website for exact details because I don't have them on the top of my head. But you'd also have a 9 a.m. practice on a Tuesday that had a couple thousand people, and you're like, what? Do y'all not have to go? This is my work. What are y'all doing? Which is awesome. So I'm definitely excited to see it, and we'll see everybody out in Ashburn, I guess is the long and the short of that. All right, Logan, time to catch everybody up on the entirety of the offseason and prepare everybody for training camp in 30 minutes or less. You ready?
Perfect. Love it. Yeah, let's hit it.
All right, so here's how we're going to do this. We're going to go each position group. What do you look for in camp at this group? So when Logan is watching the drills, when I'm watching the drills, what are we actually watching for quarterbacks, running backs, et cetera, et cetera? 2, position battle to watch at the position. And then number 3, our confidence level in this group. So you get a chance of what we think the strengths and weaknesses of the team are. And we will start with quarterback. What do you look for in camp at the quarterback position, Logan, as Jayden Daniels embarks on his rookie season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're watching individual drills, how seriously are they taking it? Are they locked in? How's the footwork? How's the release looking? Obviously, Jayden Daniels through minicamp and OTAs did a really good job of that, and I'm expecting him to continue to do that. And then in practice, you mentioned flow of practice, and I think that's a big role of the quarterback is just to kind of get guys in and out of the huddle, get the play in, get it executed. If they're in the huddle too long, he's having a hard time with the verbiage. If they're at the line of scrimmage, he's confused. When I got to play with Matt Ryan, it was crisp. We're in, we're out, plays out. You know what I mean? We're matching Matt's tempo, and I think obviously for a young quarterback, that's going to be somewhat challenging. Kind of to establish that philosophy and perspective, but that's what this is for. And so how does that look? And then again, interceptions don't really bother me. Drop passes don't really bother me, but are we following the process? Are my feet good? Am I understanding what the defense there's, I guess, let me backtrack that. There's a bad interception and there's good interceptions, right? Bad interceptions is when I'm throwing a ball and into coverage and I don't see the coverage as it is presented, right? Then there's ones where the defense makes a good play, right? They're different. And I think that's what I'm looking for is feet, timing, rhythm, relationships to receivers with the quarterback, and how are we seeing the general defense that's being presented. And I think Jayden, on the whole, did a pretty good job with that. But obviously there were issues in minicamp and OTAs, which is to be expected. But how does that continue to progress, basically, is what I'm keeping an eye on.
For sure. I think there's kind of 2 levels of it. First level is I actually think back to watching Jayden on tape, and there's just kind of this feeling this is what quarterback's supposed to look like. Yeah. And on some level, training camp starts there for quarterbacks. Is it fluid? Does it look like what it's supposed to look like? Or is it clunky? Is there a lot of, double patting the football? Is there a lot of weird timing throws where you're just that felt awkward and rushed or late or whatever? So there's a general flow and command ultimately is what that is for a quarterback. Then there's the next level stuff where I just poke you in the rib as we watch on the sideline. I was like, what do you make of the read there? What is he actually going through on the progressions? Are his eyes in the right place? And thus, is he executing the play as it's supposed to? If it's supposed to go to the post, does it go to the post? If it's supposed to, if you're supposed to read the left side because it's cover 2, are you reading the left side or did you get fooled pre-snap? There's the really high level, or not even high level at that point, quarterback stuff of process. And then there's the kind of thing that I think anybody could see without knowing the concept, without knowing anything, of a fluidity of the position, a command of the position. And so those are the things that I think we look for, certainly that I look for at quarterback.
And it's something we've talked about a lot. It's does he look comfortable, right?
Yeah.
Does he look comfortable? And I think that's as a base barrier to entry is important. Are your feet settled? Is your body posture okay? Are you flustered by the defense? Do you look confused? Those things are things that I think anybody can identify, right? If they're scrambling, John Keim brings this up all the time, and I remember it because I was playing. But Robert scrambling in 7-on-7 is not great. And so if you're seeing stuff like that a lot, Obviously, they're not seeing the coverage. They don't know how to anticipate throws well. So those types of things. And again, I expect that all to go really well. But though high level, it's general practice tempo. And then how comfortable do they look in the pocket, right? Footwork,
for sure,
timing, rhythm, those types of things.
All right, number 2, position battle to watch. To me, there's kind of like, I guess, 2 position battles here. You have the starter job, and then you have the third quarterback job. I have a pretty good guess on how all that's going to go, but I guess the question I would ask, Logan, is like, how much does Marcus Mariota's performance matter? Is this all about how good and ready Jayden is, or if Mariota is really good or really bad in camp, does that influence the starting quarterback position?
I mean, it's going to influence it to a certain extent, right? If Mariota looks like he could win you some games and looks very comfortable and, is making plays from the pocket and looks good with the zone read stuff, then you say, we don't have to accelerate Jayden. We can kind of just let him come along as he feels appropriate. But, based on what we saw in the spring, based on what we saw in OTAs, like, I feel like it's going to be, Jalen's job. Like, what I'm saying? It's like, it's his job at this point. Like, he's doing such a good job playing the position. He seems to have a master of the offense. Like, and again, Mariota didn't show those other things, I felt. And again, like, the staff might feel differently. So if he does come in as a starter, that's totally fine. But I do think it is relevant. But I also think that, like, just what we've seen from Daniels so far, it's been really impressive. And I think it's like Mariota hasn't shown that for that level of play for a couple of years now. So it's like, I don't know. It's kind of hard to articulate, but yes, it does matter, but also no, it doesn't, because you want the best person.
I think
to play.
It only matters to the extent that Jayden's does. Like, if Marcus is really good, but Jayden's also really good, it's going to be Jayden's job.
Yeah.
If Jayden is like kind of rookie level expectation struggles and Marcus is really good, well then, okay, yeah, maybe. If Marcus is not very good, then you might as well just play Jayden anyway. Who do you think? One word answer. Yeah, I'm doing this to you. One word answer. Who takes the first snap of training camp?
I'm going to say Jayden, I think.
Yeah, Daniels. The other position, or the other end of the depth chart here, is Jeff Driscoll versus Sam Hartman. I think that Driscoll is going to wind up being the 3, and the real question is whether or not he winds up on the practice squad as the 3, or whether they actually keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster.
Yeah, I think this one's probably a little bit more compelling, because I think ultimately, like, Jayden's going to be the guy. He's going to be the guy at some point, whether that's week 1 of training camp, whether it's week 2 of the season. Like, that's the expectation, and it should be. He's a second overall pick, right? But I think the more compelling one is, what do they do with the back of this quarterback room with Driscoll and Sam Hartman? Like, does Sam beat Jeff Driscoll out? Is one of them a practice squad guy? Like, how do they do that? Because again, like, that one roster spot has implications for the 5th linebacker, right, for the 7th wide receiver, for the 9th O lineman. So I think that's going to be more compelling, and definitely something that I'm going to be watching probably more acutely, because like I like we just talked about, like, obviously, if Mariota comes out in balls and he's the guy, great, but he's kind of fighting it off an inevitable tide of Daniels winning the job, right? We all expect that to happen. The other 2, it's a little bit more in flux, and I think it's a little bit harder to kind of prove definitively that you deserve an opportunity when you're that 3rd and 4th guy. So the preseason games become more important. The joint practices become more important. So in terms of, like, eat your popcorn, watch a position battle, that to me is probably the more interesting of these 4 guys.
Yeah, I mean, Hartman's definitely practice squad. I think the question is whether you could get Driscoll there, which maybe that winds up being the difference. Is like they try to get both, or one of them, and they just realize Driscoll can't. So yeah, that'll be interesting from the roster standpoint. All right, last question: a confidence level. Let's just go 1 to 10 here. Confidence level that this group will perform well in 2024. 1 to 10 is
6.
It's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's like I feel pretty good about it, but not great. Again, it's a rookie quarterback. He's done all the right things in the offseason, but you need to see him grow and develop versus NFL defenses. So, that confidence level, if they go to Miami and he looks awesome, is going to change a little bit. Then they go to the Jets. It's going to be a little bit more. And then the preseason looks good. I'm going to feel better if Jayden plays better. But again, like, I'm still kind of reserving judgment. That doesn't mean I don't think he's going to be I don't think he's going to be bad. I think he's going to be good. I think he's going to be a good player.
Yeah,
I like
this
the
is
player
2024. This is not long-term prognosis. I agree. 6. Like, I think he could be really good. I think he's probably going to be like pretty solid with some ups and downs. And that's dependent on a couple of other things too that we're going to talk about in terms of the other position groups that support him. It's the first year of a new scheme, so all that stuff goes into it. All right, next up, let's go to the O-line next. So our 3 key questions. What do you look for in camp at this group? So when you watch an O-line drill, what are you looking for?
Yeah, so obviously every drill is a little bit different, but when you're watching one-on-ones, like, do they show a proclivity for pass protection, right? Are they in a good spot? Are they on the line? What's their timing look like on their punch? Are they bringing their feet with them? Are they leaving them behind? Are they bending at the waist? It's a little bit more technically nuanced, which is crazy to say because quarterback's way harder to play. But, like offensive line, there's a huge technical element, kind of like a martial art to it that you're always evaluating. In team drills, you want to make sure that their communication is excellent, right? And that starts with the quarterback, that goes to the tight ends. But if they're part of the pass protection or run blocking surface, like, are they targeting runs effectively? Are there combinations to those targets good? And is everybody on the same page? And obviously that's kind of high level. And then are they winning their physical one-on-one or double team matchup? And that's kind of what you're looking at for when you're looking at offensive linemen, I think.
Yeah, this we should probably talk about in depth as camp goes. But the only thing I'll add is, like, what are they actually running? So like zone versus gap scheme runs, like, we don't know what this offense fully is going to be yet. And I don't know that it's going to be totally given away in the preseason, obviously, but I think it's worth mentioning that eventually, like, the line is going to tell us something. So that's the only thing that I'll add, but that's a larger conversation for later. Position battle to watch. This one's pretty easy. Left tackle. It's Trent Scott. It's Brandon Coleman. It is Cornelius Lucas. Those are the 3 names in the mix here, Logan. How do you expect them to approach the position battle of it all?
Yeah, I mean, left tackle is going to be really interesting to watch, obviously, because like right now, I think Cornelius Lucas is the best pass protector of the group. But I do think, like, what is this offense going to look like? I think one of the things coming out of OTAs, we didn't get a great feel for, what the down to down offense looks like. We got a good feel for kind of the 7-on-7, the hurry up, the 2-minute, but, like, we don't really know what kind of runs they're going to be running. Like, maybe Trent Scott's more fitting for the runs and they can kind of game plan around him as a pass protector. Or Brandon Coleman, you see that athleticism and the length come together in the right way. I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic that can happen, but again, in the mini camps, it was, he's got a little bit of work to do, and he's only been playing football for 4 years, so there's a little bit of a developmental period there. So it's hard to say because I think everyone kind of has their role, and I think it is very dependent on the scheme. Obviously, Coleman's different because if he develops really quickly, then he becomes the guy. But I think those other 2 guys, it really is more dependent on the vision they have for the position itself, if that makes sense. And I think the other thing to point out with the offensive line, I think the left guard spot's up. I think the swing guard spot's up. I think the swing tackle spot's up. I think that offensive line is maybe one of the more interesting positions for throughout the camp. You know what I'm saying? In terms of, like, how the chips ultimately settle. So, like, if you're watching matchups, like, they got to pick 9 guys. Right now there's like 15 of them on the roster. So they have to make a big cut there. And I think the other thing is, like, new offensive line coach, new offensive coordinator, all these names that the fans are familiar with, there's not this loyalty to them in the same way that there was before. So this is really interesting. Maybe the most significant position for the offense as a whole going into the season. I know people want to talk about quarterback, but if this doesn't come together the right way, this could be really, really tough to work around. So in terms of focus, I think the fans should be really looking at this because, again, left tackle, we highlighted and why that's important. Everyone knows why the left tackle is important, but then it's across the board as well, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, you have to decide, but then you have to, like, get ready for the season. This is the constant battle of training camp for coaches is, okay, if we have position battles, we have to give guys a chance to, like, fight it out. Like, we don't want to limit the reps. We want to give guys a chance to grow. We want to give them a chance to, like, really show what they can do. but eventually we have to pick our guys so that they can get ready for the season as a number one group. And in a position like offensive line, like you're going to have to make some changes. You're not going to start the same 5 guys for 17 weeks, but at the same time, like you want to prepare as if that's the case. You want to have your best chance out there with your best group. So they do have to make this decision within the first, let's say 3 weeks or so, 2.5 weeks of camp, and then hopefully get a couple of weeks of practice in where they're able to have a true one group that gets to coalesce and build some chemistry, et cetera, which leads us to Logan, final O-line question, confidence level in the offensive line, that this is all going to work out in the end.
4-ish. 4. Like there's a lot of moving pieces here. And again, like I think I'm probably more confident in Wiley than a lot of people. I'm very confident in Cosme. Biotis is obviously, his track record in Dallas is very good. Maybe one of the better centers in the league, like we talked about with our rankings. But to me, there's like half your offensive line is over half is going to be new, and like that's always tough. And so again, like, that's why coaches get paid. That's why offensive coordinators get paid to make sure these guys come together and you get the right group working as one. But there's still so many questions. And again, like they can be answered and the joint practices are going to be really helpful for that. But just a lot of unknowns at the moment with that, which again is one of the things that makes me a little bit nervous. And I have a very high confidence in Cornelius Lucas as a good player. Trent Scott played well when he had his opportunity, but they just don't have that tremendous pedigree. But if Cliff thinks he can work around it, or Brandon Coleman develops, like, more power to you. But there's a lot of things that still remain to be seen, and a lot of gelling that needs to happen, which makes it a little bit up in the air, I think.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think I'm at like a 4 or 5. Because
4 or 5.
I guess the one thing that I have more confidence in than last year is, and I have confidence this going into the year, but fool me once, fool me twice, whatever, maybe I'm a fool, is the play calling. Like,
Sure.
I do think that Dan, from a head coaching standpoint, and then on down to Cliff and that staff, realizes we have a young quarterback, we have an incredibly talented quarterback, but we need to make sure we put him in position to succeed. We have certain weaknesses. Adam is a realist about this roster, I think, as well. So he's probably being like, hey, guys, don't forget, we haven't fixed the O-line yet. This is year 1 of the rebuild. Like, There is a realism versus this like blind optimism that last year's group seemed to have, that everything would just work out and maybe the players were a little bit better than they thought. And so I think that that realness that they have about who they are can translate to better play calling and better scheme to protect whatever it needs to be protected. Whether it's, let's say Trent Scott does win the job at left tackle, you do scheme up to protect him as a pass protector. If Cornelius Lucas wins the job, they're not going to run a bunch of outside stuff that makes Cornelius Lucas run because they know they can't do it. Right. And so I think that the realness about where they are will lead to a better plan, which is why I'm willing to go to a 5. But from a talent level, there still is certainly, like, this is the next big area for them to attack next offseason. This is what happens in a multi-year rebuild. You can't do it all at once. And so I'm realistic about that as well. All right, skill positions. Let's get to it, and we can blitz through these pretty quickly, I feel like, Logan. Let's start off with the running backs. Anything in particular that you look for when you watch running backs? I feel like this may be the hardest group to watch in camp.
It is hard to watch in camp, but I think, again, like kind of the same stuff you're looking at with the receivers, like how they catch the football, how they handle pass protection responsibilities. That's a big one. Like if they're in on a pass and they got to protect and they're like looking around like they have no idea what's going on. How do they protect the football? How do they run? How fast are they? Those are all things you're kind of keeping an eye on. Just their general playmaking ability. Again, like you said, it's hard, but like, I think last year in training camp, you saw signs of the runner that Chris Rodriguez could be. You saw signs the year before of what B-Rob could be in camp. And I think it is not the best metric, but it is very, very helpful when looking at that group specifically, because they are playing football. They're just not getting tackled. And so I think those are kind of some general things I'm looking at with the running backs.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's, you can try to guess like, hey, that was a good run, good cut, whatever. But when they're not really full pads to the ground, you don't know if the dude would have gotten arm tackled in the line or whether, if the D tackle was really trying to go for it. So it's just really tough to judge the running game. But all that stuff you said makes perfect sense. Position battle to watch. Really, there's not one at running back. I guess McNichols versus Rodriguez for the third spot.
I mean, for me, it's all four of those guys. Like, I think when you look, it's the two rookies, Rodriguez and McNichols. I think honestly, in terms of true position battle, because I think everyone wants to give Rodriguez the nod, but I think with a new staff, like there's no loyalty there, to that guy. So I think it's all four of those guys kind of up for it. And obviously you don't want to forget the UDFAs, Michael Wiley and Austin Jones. I think those guys, I kind of counted them off early because it's like, what are they? They're just bodies at running back, but I thought they caught the ball well. I thought they looked fast. I thought they kind of, again, fit that third down pass catcher mold. And so you never know, maybe one of those guys makes some waves. So I really think it's like for that third running back spot, it's like open season, quite honestly. So, B-Rob, I'm very confident. Austin Eckler coming off the high ankle sprain, very confident he's going to, look better than he did last year. But after that, it's kind of your flavor, what you want that position to look like moving forward.
No, that makes sense. I think that also for a fourth guy, potentially, like that's a special teams, fourth tight end, fifth linebacker, 18th
100%.
Safety, it feels like. But yeah, that position is always super important. All right, wide receiver, Logan. What do we look for in camp at this group?
So a bunch of stuff. I mean, if you want to get super technical, like how they release off the ball, do they understand stems, which is different than breaks? Stems kind of like how you work the middle portion of your route to create space, and then breaks, creating separation at the top. Can you win versus man-to-man coverage? And how do you catch the football in contested catch situations? Because and this is like a bad metric, but it is effective. Are you making plays? Like when they throw you the football, I don't care about all that other stuff. If you're making the catch, that usually is a pretty good indicator that you're on the right path. So those are kind of some big ones. And obviously, like with it changes for a guy like Terry. Like, what's his relationship look like with Jayden Daniels? Like that's a big one. And Jahan, kind of the same thing. But I think those are kind of some really high level things I'm looking at with the receivers. And then for some of those bottom half of the roster guys, like how are they doing during special team stuff? How are they blocking? That's another big one. Like you want to see a receiver that like wants to make a team, like watch them go crack a safety. And that usually opens some eyes about a guy who's tough, physical, and wants to compete. So those are some things I keep an eye on with the receiver group.
I'm glad you said the make plays thing, because I sometimes feel like a crazy person when I'm like, I don't know, that dude he winds up with the football and he winds up in the end zone and then he makes the team. And I'm like, I don't know. Everyone else tried to say that it was this nuance, whatever. Not everyone else, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I do think like the ability to just figure it out and make plays at that position matters maybe more than any other position outside of quarterback. And so, yes, process stuff is really important. Releases, obviously catching the football, but like if you catch the football, that's kind of an important part of the whole making the play thing. So I'm glad to hear you say that. Position battle to watch. I think that there's 4 here that are pretty much locks to make the team. I think McLaurin's a lock. I think Dotson's a lock. I think McCaffrey's a lock. I think Zacchaeus is a lock because they brought him in as a veteran.
I'm in that same boat, yeah.
Everyone else,
Figure
good
it
luck.
out.
So here are some of the names. De'Ami Brown, Jamison Crowder, Demir Byrd, Dax Milne, Mitchell Tinsley, Davion Davis, Bryson Tremaine, Kaz Allen. Those are that gets me through everybody who's on the ESPN.com version of the depth chart. I think there's some UDFAs and stuff that are even farther down the list. But there is a ton of guys here for somewhere between 1 and 3 spots.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about Luke McCaffrey, keep wanting to say Christian, Luke McCaffrey.
It'd be sweet if they got Christian McCaffrey.
And Zacchaeus.
Cool. That would solve some problems.
Is that they return kicks. So all of a sudden, these guys that, kind of are going to make the rosters as kick returners, they become a little bit less valuable, I think. And I think that's something to keep an eye on too. Are they using Luke McCaffrey as a returner? Are they using Zacchaeus as a returner? Are they using Christian Rodriguez as a returner or a DB as a returner? Because if they find their returner from somewhere else, I think that negatively affects Crowder. I think that negatively affects Kazmir Allen. I think it negatively affects Tinsley also. And then that by extension bumps up a guy like De'Ami Brown or bumps up a guy like Bryson Tremaine, who had a really solid OTA minicamp phase, right? So that changes the dynamic. But let's say they don't have the returner and they feel like they're going to use, Luke McCaffrey in a different way. And then all of a sudden Crowder's that guy. Like that's a different roster spot. So I agree. I think this is kind of open season. I think another maybe interesting one is Luke versus Jahan in terms of usage and role. He was getting a lot of reps on the outside as opposed to a slot guy. Do they feel like they can move Jahan inside a little bit more as that slot player, or I'm not saying anything specifically like that I observed during OTAs other than Luke got a lot of reps outside, but maybe that's something that progresses and they split reps outside and Jahan shifts inside. That's something else I would just kind of keep an eye on as a position battle, but I agree. Outside of those top 4 guys that you just mentioned, it's going to be a total free for all. And I think it's one of the more enjoyable ones to watch because stylistically, we don't really know exactly what they're looking for just yet. You know what I mean?
I don't know if they know what they're looking for just yet.
Right.
They might look at it as like, let's see who wins, and then we'll, shape the last little corner of the offense around that, because you can have some flexibility there. I also wonder on the McCaffrey Dotson thing, like Luke's toughness and blocking.
Sure.
He's a converted quarterback. I don't know that he's the world's greatest blocker coming in, but his
Tough
willingness
kid.
to is through the roof. Where Jahan is a smaller guy, like at that position. So I do wonder if they kind of want Luke to be the 2, even if he winds up playing inside when Jahan's on the field. Like that's what training camp is for, is to figure that stuff out. All right, confidence level 1 to 10 that this position is going to perform really well in 2024. I'll go first on this one. I have like a 7.5. Let's say.
I was going to say 7. I was going to say 6.5, 7. Yep.
Like I love Terry. Terry's great. I don't know that he's one of the 5 best receivers. Actually, I'm pretty sure he's not one of the 5 best receivers in football. I'm not so sure that he's not one of the 10 best on his best days, with his toughness, his speed, some of the stuff that we've seen him do with mediocre to bad quarterback play. What happens if he actually gets good quarterback play? I think about that a lot with like Ayuk, right? Ayuk, we're talking about Brandon Ayuk. Like, how different are they really? Where like Ayuk had 73 catches for like 1,200 yards last year, but he's playing in a Kyle offense. Terry's never had anything close to that. If you swap them out, how different are the stats? We just don't know. What I'm hoping is that we get to find out, that we actually see good offense, that we see good quarterback play. That'd be cool. Jahan, again, like, is he what he was as a rookie? Is he a real first-round pick type talent? Is he not? And then everyone else is kind of a big question mark. Luke, more so because he's a rookie, and what does he develop into? And then you have all these guys that we just talked about. We don't know what they are, or who's even going to be on the team, even if they have some good options. So I like the pieces. I think Cliff obviously has been incredibly wide receiver friendly. That's his air raid roots. I think Terry's awesome. 7.5. Yeah,
7, 6.5, something like that. But I'm in the same boat with you. Like all the reasons you just listed. Did we do confidence level for running backs?
I don't know. Did we skip over it? I think we did.
But I'm like a 9 on backs, just for the record. I'm very high on that. Yeah.
Okay. I'm like an 8, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Now we got that. Cool. We'll have to. I don't know that we're going to edit that back into the right order,
just
but
leave it there. Leave it there.
If we make some YouTube shorts or reels or TikToks out of it, sorry for the extra editing to the folks who do that, aka William. All right. Last but not least, on the offensive side, tight ends. What do you look for in camp at this group at your old position?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the guy. Like if you're playing that F off the ball move guy, like it's a lot of similar stuff to receivers. Like, can you win versus man-to-man coverage? Can you find space? Can you catch the football in contested catch situations? And for the blocking Y, like, do you catch the football when they throw it to you? And can you mash your face on people? And I feel pretty confident that Zach through OTAs and minicamp showed he could be the F. And Bates obviously has shown over the course of his career that he could be the Y. So also another thing you keep an eye on with tight ends specifically is usage. So like when are we using 12? Like how does our 13 packages look? Like what is, are we in 21 at all? Like what does that look like? Because it kind of informs the general tempo and cadence and identity of the offense. So I think that's another thing in addition to kind of the technical stuff of the position.
So position battle to watch for this one. In some ways, it feels kind of like it's set, but
Sure.
I actually wonder. So Ertz is going to make the team. He's tight end 1. Sinnott's going to make the team. He's tight end 2. But depending on how Sinnott plays and what they think he can do, and depending on how Armani Rogers plays,
Yeah.
I wonder if Armani can find his way on this team, either as a tight end 4, or do they feel like Sinnott can do all the blocking stuff and they wind up moving on from John Bates. And I know you love you some John Bates, and you think he's one of the best blocking tight ends in the league. But if they feel like they can get all that role out of Ben Sinnott as a rookie, and that Armani Rogers is this special athlete that they can do stuff with, that would be my pitch for a position battle here.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think if I've had conversations with some of the offensive staff, nothing too in depth, but basically like, what do you see? What are traits you look for in the F? What are traits you look for in the Y? And obviously they're very different positions, and this is not like groundbreaking. It's pretty common. This is a pretty common standard around the NFL. But Y, like they have to be able to block a defensive end by themselves. And right now, looking at the roster, I don't think there's anybody on the roster outside of John Bates that can do that. So the way you think about it is it's like two separate positions, right? There's the F, you got a lot of Fs, and you got one Y. And so that's why I think it's very likely John Bates makes the team, because as much as I like Sinnott as a blocker, he's not overly long, he's not overly heavy. And when you look at people who play Y, they are longer armed, 33 and a half, 34 inch arm type guys. They're bigger. They're about 265, 270. And there's a reason they all look like that, right? It's because they have to be able to block these big, long, rangy defensive ends. And so I don't think he can do that now. I could be completely wrong, and you're right. And it is a position battle, and they choose to keep those two. But again, like you mentioned Armani, like I love Armani's physicality when he was healthy, but there's a technical nuance to playing in line that is hard for guys to learn, especially converted position guys. Like there's a reason that we talked about this with one of our mailbags. There's a reason like people from other sports, like basketball players, rugby players, move to the F position as opposed to the Y position, because there's less technical acumen there. So I think while that is entirely possible, I do think it's unlikely based on some of the parameters they've set for the position, based on what I've heard.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, Cole Turner's in the mix as well.
Sure.
I do not have high hopes.
Colston Yankoff, too, is a guy I think we got to keep an eye on there, too. I think he had a great OTA minicamp period, and he's a guy that just like he's got it, and he moves really well, and you just say that guy could make some waves.
He passes the make plays test.
Yes, 100%.
All right, that is the offense, Logan. You excited to do the defense?
Yeah, I mean that was a long shot. That was a long, very comprehensive deal, but always got to talk about defense.
Always. Defense, they say it wins championships. That's going to come out Wednesday morning. So the morning that training camp launches, if you say you're going to training camp, listen to it along the way. We'll get you ready. That is Wednesday morning. Tomorrow, bonus pod, pew, 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 pew. Zach Ertz joins Take Command. So have that for you on Tuesday. Subscribe so you don't miss anything. And we will see you on the next podcast that you choose to click on here on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.